consumers are still submitting leads to the market. I'm just curious about how dealerships are now fulfilling those sales and building future sales pipeline. To introduce everybody on the call, my name is George Mienie. I am CEO of AutoTrader, and we've arranged this podcast to try and have a general discussion around how COVID-19 has affected the automotive world, particularly the retail part of the automotive world and car dealerships particularly. And on the call we have Stan Dewey, who is the owner of Dewey, Hertzberg and Levy. Am I getting that right, Stan, or have you changed the name?
Almost, George. Dewey, Hertzberg, Levy.
Dewey, Hertzberg, Levy. Okay, so Levy was the wrong pronunciation. Welcome, Stan, and I'm looking forward to getting your insights into the world and how it's changed. And then we have Cecilia Rees. Did I say that right, Cecilia? Dealer principal of Raceview Motors.
Yes, 100%. Thank you, George.
Good stuff. Welcome, Cecilia. Appreciate you being here. And then we have Bobby Petkoff from Mitmac Motors in Pretoria. How are you, Bobby?
I'm very well, and yourself, so thank you for having me here. Hello, everyone.
You're very welcome, and thank you for giving up your time. And then last but not least, we have Darlene Menzies, CEO of Finfind. How are you, Darlene? And did I say your surname right?
You did, George. Morning. Great to be here.
Great stuff. Great stuff. So thank you all for giving up your time, and let's jump straight into the podcast. COVID-19 has officially put us into lockdown as a country, and the impact of this on the automotive retail industry, and I suppose businesses by and large, and anybody listening to this podcast will probably get some value even if they're not a car dealership, because some of the stuff I think is generally applicable to small to medium businesses. And what we want to try and find out today is how have businesses adapted, how has the world changed, and what do we see in the future once this lockdown is lifted, and then more particularly, what assistance is available from what the president said, and how do we understand that? So I suppose jumping straight in, and maybe a question for Bobby and Cecilia is, what have you done up to this point in your dealership to manage the COVID-19 crisis? Maybe let's go for Cecilia first.
Well, obviously, at the start of everything, we went out to make sure that all our employees was informed about what COVID-19 is, how it will affect them personally. Obviously, making our work environment at that stage very safe for them, telling them where they can go if they, need assistance by having thinking that they do have the virus, and obviously sending them home if they felt sick, to protect the other workers that still stayed at work. But with the lockdown, obviously things changed, and none of our employees are currently working at the dealership. So everybody has gone home, but we've made sure that, we gave them the necessary information to not only look after themselves, but to prevent the spreading of the virus and to care for their families at home.
And Cecilia, out of interest, how is your dealership operating right now, or is it fully shut down?
It's fully shut down, but we are working remotely. So we made sure that key staff members had connectivity at home so that we can work. Our website is very well equipped to deal with the digital marketing and digital selling. That's from choosing your right vehicle right down to submitting your finance, submitting your FICA documentation, getting approval. The only thing that we're really battling with at this stage is how to deliver the vehicles to our customers. Obviously, everything is at this stage postponed until the 21st, 21 days are over.
So are you getting consumer engagement? Are you getting people applying for finance for cars?
Yes, absolutely. But it's dropped tremendously. It's dropped by 61% already on working day 3 for us. But we are still getting interest. Our leads has also dropped a lot, but we are still at least engaging with our customers, being out there, getting the applications, getting the finance submitted. And we have managed to conclude a deal, but obviously the delivery will only take place on the 17th of April.
That's awesome to hear that you've actually concluded a deal because, from an AutoTrader point of view, consumers are still searching. I went onto our site yesterday and 1,200 to 1,500 people live on the site when I logged in, which was amazing to see. And consumers are still submitting leads to the market. I'm just curious about how dealerships are now fulfilling those sales and building future sales pipeline. Bobby, how's your dealership dealt with this crisis?
Well, it's given us valuable time and a wonderful opportunity to take every single salesperson that we have. We've got 27 people. So we've taken all 27 people, put them on our website and asked for critique. So I've employed 2 extra website developers in the time that we're closed. So every single comment that I receive from our staff, not only sales, F&Is, everybody's is doing a rundown on our website. We're trying to improve, even if it's a little bit every day. So we've introduced a whole new range of functionality on our site to give, the consumers more value. And try to improve digital retailing. I believe that in the very near future, very, very near future, the only contact you'll have with the client is on delivery. So we're trying to prep ourselves as much as possible for that. And I agree, leads are still there coming in. My sales team is engaging clients every single minute, following up. That's very important right now because, like you said, ma'am, the leads have definitely dropped. But in my opinion, the leads that you get now are the top quality leads. Only serious buyers will actually send you a request now. So how you handle that will determine the outcome.
That's a very interesting point, though, is that only high quality and really serious people are going to submit leads. I mean, we've seen up to a 30% drop in site traffic and conversion, which is, we're still seeing 60 to 70% of the traffic and conversion, but we have seen a decline, like Cecilia mentioned in their website statistics as well. But it's really nice to hear that both Bobby and Cecilia are still engaging with consumers, building that sales pipeline. And it's quite a good point that I didn't think about before. Is those leads are going to be high quality leads, like Bobby mentions. Bobby, what do you believe the sentiment is out in the marketplace? I mean, you're quite connected with some other dealerships, and I'm pretty sure you talk to a lot of other dealers like I do, and I'm pretty sure Cecilia does as well. But what is the sentiment out in the market? What are you hearing from other dealerships?
Generally, dealers are very down and they're very confused at this time. So I think the more that you panic, the more that your staff will panic. You need to be, as a dealer principal, as a business owner, you need to be the person showing strength, number one, and vision, very important. Everybody is confused out there. I engage my staff every single day and I tell them, guys, this is the plan during lockdown. This is how we're going to generate leads. This is what we need to do with those valuable leads. This is what we're going to do on day one, straight after the lockdown is finished. And this is our short-term plan, 1 week, 2 weeks. Obviously, commission earners are very stressed and business owners don't know what to do in the situation. And my best advice is fill your pipeline up right to the brim. Once you open, make sure that you deliver everything that you've sort of committed or gotten holding deposits or applications, and just do the best you can in the two weeks, after lockdown ends. If you have a plan, if you have a vision, there's no need to stress. It's that uncertainty that everybody experiences at the moment that makes you nervous. So just have a plan, have a focus, and work on your plan. That's my advice, and that's what I've been hearing from the more dynamic, positive dealers out there.
Thanks, Bobby. And Bobby and Cecilia both active and really well-established dealerships in Raceview Motors and Mitmac Motors in Pretoria and Alberton. So let's turn our attention to some experts in the room, Darlene and Stan. And I'd like to know from your perspective, firstly, Darlene, how has the small business or medium business sector been impacted by this virus?
Yeah, I think it's been a dramatic impact, especially on smaller businesses, owner-managed businesses, because they want to look after their staff primarily, but they're also aware that they need to make sure that they've got sort of a cash flow runway going forward. So many people have already started having a look at retrenching staff, started having a look at giving sort of 25% or less salary to make sure that they could try and retain everyone, but that everyone got enough to be able to cover their monthly overheads. So it's a little bit of a situation of those businesses that sort of saw things coming early and were able to get some cash flow relief and build a bit of working capital even from a funding point of view to give themselves the necessary one way are fine. Those that didn't do that and are sort of really facing a cash cliff quite quickly are starting to have to make some very serious decisions. And it's around those things that we really need to guide people. So I think we know that small business are the only sector really, and that includes the car dealerships that are going to, or small and medium businesses are going to see the country through any kind of economic crisis. And so those are the businesses that really need to be protected. And so I really feel banks and government need to be doing a lot more than they're doing at the moment, but we're trusting that will come. But yes, it's a sector hardest hit and employing a great number of South Africans. So like the previous person said, leaders have to keep positive. We have to be optimistic realist. You have to be, look at the situation as it is, but then you have to be optimistic and find innovative ways to get out of that. But it definitely has hit small business very hard.
I like that optimistic realist. That's I might just plagiarize that, Darlene, if you don't mind. Optimistic realist, and I see Bobby smiling, so he fully agrees. So, what advice would you give to SMEs during this time? Because you mentioned there a cash cliff, and at the end of the day, I suppose that's where the rubber hits the road. Is if a small business begins to run out of cash, you've got to make that cash last as long as possible. And you mentioned things like retrenchments, salary cuts, and that's what some businesses are looking at doing. What other advice would you give them in that vein?
Well, I always say that the best time to borrow money is when you don't need it, because that's when the business looks healthiest from your financial statement point of view. And so if a business right now is feeling like they're looking into the future and they think that they've got enough room, I would still go and apply for a credit facility and get the credit facility granted now while the business is in a good space. We don't know how long things may last. So that's the first thing. I always say the second best time to go and raise finance is right now. Raising money for business is not the same as personal debt. You need money in a business to grow it. You need money in a business to keep it buoyant, especially in these sorts of times. So there are a couple of lenders out there outside of banks, private sector lenders, and some of what governments are doing that I think people right now should be going to position themselves to get funding and if they, just to really ensure that they're going to be able to carry themselves through. The other thing is take advantage of all the relief being given. So SARS is giving relief as far as PAYE is concerned, as far as UIF is concerned. There are reliefs being given by banks in different ways, and we can discuss those. So I think take advantage of the relief. But I think the most important thing is your staff. We don't build our business, our staff build our business, and we build our staff. And I think at this time, you've got to be very honest with your team. Sit them down figuratively. Obviously, we're all sitting remotely, but I think it's necessary to keep communicating. I think it's necessary to be saying to them that we none of us know how long we're trusting the lockdown will finish in 21 days. You look at Wuhan and some of the other places that have successfully ridden this crisis out better than others. The shutdown there was the lockdown there was 51 days. And so we need to be saying to them that, right now things are looking good, but we need to be realistic about where we're at. And it's not a personal thing. It's not a thing related to the business and the business performance. It's related to a health crisis that's unprecedented. And we need to have, I've had 3 of my businesses were liquidated before I built 3 very successful businesses in the earlier days. And my lessons from those days were be completely honest, be transparent, let the staff know where they're at. And I think communication is key at this time. Don't sort of sit at home and sort of think that, no news is good news. Staff need to feel you out there at the moment. They need to hear the leader's voice. They need to know that where you're at, how you're feeling, are you buoyant, are there things they need to be considering?
That's very good advice. Thanks, Darlene. And I call that first part that you spoke about productive and unproductive debt. And raising debt for your business is definitely productive debt. And so I echo the sentiments of Darlene in that go and raise productive debt, because it is productive debt at this stage. Personal debt is unproductive debt. You get yourself into some serious trouble
Correct.
if you live a lifestyle based on debt. But productive debt is the way to go. And we're gonna circle back to some of those relief options with Darlene in a few minutes' time. But let's get on to the contractual side. And Stan Dewey has been a long time attorney and friend of mine for AutoTrader. Stood by us over the last decade and a half. And Stan, from your perspective, businesses obviously get themselves into obligations and they have to pay debts and they have, as Darlene said, got to possibly think about staff first, because at AutoTrader that's what we do. We believe very, very pointedly that without people your business is nothing. And so I think people come first in this instance. And so it doesn't mean that everything else comes second, but legally, where do businesses stand from a contractual point of view in stuff and suppliers and things that they have to now find funds for?
George, obviously that's a fascinating question. Very interesting to unravel if we were under less pressure. But essentially, what we're dealing with here is, from a legal point of view, a concept we call impossibility of performance. So due to the virus, everything has sort of changed to a large extent in the contractual landscape, particularly when it comes to timing to do certain things and fulfill obligations. As Bobby said earlier, delivery is obviously an issue in the dealership game. Motor vehicles are not sort of an off-the-shelf type product, which you can just jump in and drive off. People like to inspect cars. They like to make sure they're happy with them, etc. So the deals which, the dealers may be able to conclude now, electronically as it were, the difficulty with this is when it comes to delivery time, the consumer or the client customer can still theoretically change his or her mind and say, well, actually, this isn't the sort of car I bought off the net. So although you may think you've got XYZ deals in the bag, there is some wiggle room here for the customer to say, but I'm not happy with this car. And, that could administratively, if nothing else, have quite an impact on the dealership's deals. You can't really take them to the bank yet. Most people, one would assume, as you say, buying now are the sort of top end type of buyer. So you may not have this difficulty, but potentially the contract really only concludes once he or her drives off in the vehicle and is happy. And because of the lockdown, we can't deliver right now. But by all means, and I also like the advice, I think it's very sound, businesses have to continue trading as close to the way they have been trading in this situation. That's absolutely crucial. And you can't obviously let that perception go out to staff members either. But equally for consumers or potential customers, I think owners of dealerships have to make it clear to their potential customers how they are working in the lockdown, which cars they can buy, how the sales will operate, when they will get delivery, how the financing will work. That sort of communication to potential buyers is probably more important now than ever before, because the consumers, as much as the employees, etc., are uncertain. So clarity on how each dealership is going to operate from a contractual point of view as well would really assist the situation. But yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, the whole COVID-19 thing has created a scenario where, people can escape their obligations. They can say, but due to this, I can't pay what I agreed to pay for the car, or I don't have the cash flow, etc. But, leaving that aside, we simply have to continue operating as best we can.
So on the flip side of that, does the same rule apply to corporate businesses like car dealerships and their obligations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, a corporate dealership could say, for example, to their bankers or to the finance houses, they might have floor plans or whatever arrangements they have. They might even factor books of debt, all of those deals. They can legitimately go to the bank and say, we have this difficulty, it's out of our hands. Clearly, nobody foresaw this happening. So we can't honor our obligations in this regard. And you would have the legal right to do that on the concept of impossibility of performance. But it's not indefinite. It's only for a period. And once the period is over, the commitment will come back. But it gets interesting because would you then have to pay it all at once? Would you then have to pay interest on it? Probably not. But from a legal point of view, I certainly cannot even remember or think of anything remotely like this. Possibly a strike once or twice, or a bad storm or something. Events like that have caused a very temporary disruption. But this is extremely novel. And the law says impossibility of performance. You don't have to comply whilst that endures. But once it's over, it's back to school, as it were, and you have to deal with it.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. That's some good insights. And I suppose the sentiment around this topic is not to encourage businesses to default on their debts, and not to encourage consumers to default and not honor their word or the contracts that they get themselves into. But at the end of the day, for all of us to get through this and to come out the other side, that's, I suppose, the whole point of this discussion and the reason why these very difficult topics are being spoken about. What's your view, Cecilia?
I think that it was very good advice. Thank you, Stan. The major thing will be is to keep on communicating with not only your staff, your suppliers and your customers continuously, and being very honest about your communication and the way forward. I think for the dealership itself, the importance is like Bobby said, to fill that pipeline, to have customers lined up, to get the commitment when we start operating again, to make sure that we can conclude the deal by delivering the vehicle. It's like Stan says, unless the vehicle is delivered, there is no transaction. But at this stage, all we can do as a dealership is communicating. Communicate to your staff, communicate to your supplier, communicate to your customers, make sure your pipeline is full, and as far as possible, get commitment from the customer to ensure delivery on the 17th of April, or a bit later if not possible immediately.
So thanks, Cecilia. I appreciate that. So I suppose that everything boils down to just transparent and forthright communication. Is tell everybody where you stand as a business, and don't let that slip, because that's, I suppose, where a business gets itself into trouble, is when they don't communicate to either their customer or their supplier, and be honest about where you find yourself. Because at the end of the day, you have salaries to pay, and I like the sentiment that people need to come first, and your staff need to come first. Bobby, what's your view on the discussion so far, and then we're going to get into some of the more detailed discussion with Darlene.
Processes and procedures, like Mr. Stan said, are very important. We've communicated to all our clients, if you apply for finance or pay a fully refundable deposit during the lockdown, we will allow for 5 working days after lockdown for a transaction to be concluded. So it gives the client ample time to research the car, make sure that the car is the car that you've presented. And another point that I would like to raise, especially for car dealers right now, it's impossible for your client to come to your dealership and have a look at the quality of your vehicle. What we encourage is go visit third-party sites like Hello Peter, go and visit our Facebook reviews, and see what other people are saying about us. Not what we're saying about ourselves, but rather what the people that sat in the chair making the decision, should I buy from this dealership or not. So that's a very big advantage. If you've got a good reputation in the marketplace, use it. That's my 2 cents worth.
Well, I don't think that's 2 cents, Bobby. That's very valuable insight. Is if a consumer's listening to this, and I like Bobby's outlook on it. Is be transparent with the consumer. You have a couple of days. You can get out of the deal if you really want to. If we will sell this car to a consumer that wants to buy it, and that market demand is going to come back. So be transparent with the consumer, and play into what Stan is talking about, which is. The deal's not concluded. There's no legal obligation, but if you transparently communicate, you'll more than likely close the deal. So, getting to more of the details with Darlene now, what would you say are the things that exist, or the opportunities that exist in what the government has put on the table so far? Some of the detail around the relief mechanisms that the government has put on the table for SMEs, and what are the criteria for being an SMME to benefit from what the government has done?
Yes, if you look, there's a number of things that government and we can also look at some of the banks have put in place. But if we start with government, initially, the first thing to look at is SARS. So any business that turns over less than 50 million is being given a relief of being able to delay 20% of their PAYE over the next 4 months. So whatever your normal PAYE payment is, 20% of that you don't have to pay, and then that will be made up in the months following that. The criteria there, though, is that you have to be compliant as far as SARS is concerned. You've got to be up to date with your VAT and PAYE and income tax, etc. But if you are and you're turning over less than 50 million, you get a 20%. It's not a discount per se because you've got to pay it back, but there's a delay of payment. Also, if you have any staff that work for you that turn over 6,500 rand or less, there's actually an incentive that government is giving to add an additional 500 rand per qualifying employee. All of these details are very well laid out on the SARS website, and they unpack each one of them and how you apply for them, etc. The other thing that government has put on the table, they haven't given specifics about it, but they're talking about non-payment of UIF over this period. And while that's not a huge amount, depending on well, it's not a huge amount always in comparison to your total salary bill. It does bring some relief. Government is also offering certain funding and debt relief funding. The thing about that again is that you have to have a tax clearance certificate, so you have to be tax compliant. And I always say to government at these times, most people, like we said, are wanting to pay their staff first. And so very often if someone is realizing that they've got to make their cash stretch over the next month, many of them might have been in a situation where they have to delay maybe their PAYE payment and to rather make sure they can pay their full staff salaries this month and next month. And as such, maybe wouldn't be compliant at the moment. So I think that's something that government really needs to review. But I understand that they want to make sure that they continue to get, their full tax payments in. But a lot of small businesses, I know some of the more medium businesses and more stable businesses that have, working capital in reserve all the time would be tax compliant. But I know there's a lot of smaller owner-managed businesses that won't be in that situation. So I don't know how much help that's going to be.
Well, I suppose get tax compliant, right? You can get tax compliant during this time.
Yes. So, it's difficult, though, to get tax compliant in this time if the reason for your non-compliance is the fact that you maybe have some outstanding, an amount maybe outstanding for VAT or PAYE for the last month, for instance. If it's because you haven't done submissions, then obviously that's something you've got more time now that you can work with your accountant to get up to date. They've also done a debt relief fund. Again, there's a site that you can go to. The sorts of sectors, though, that they're looking to fund seem to be those that are more in the essential services environments. So if you have a look at the businesses that are continuing to trade at the moment, it seems that they're pushing a lot of the funds there, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because those businesses would be the ones that are getting revenue at the moment, so typically probably wouldn't need tax relief. But, when you look at the actual form itself, it's asking for those specific sectors. If we turn to the banks now, I think the banks have, Standard Bank, as we know, came on board really quickly, followed by Nedbank and Absa. But I think some of what they're doing is very helpful. They're giving repayment holidays on credit. So where you've got loans or, credit facilities, they're giving 3 or 4 month payment facility holidays depending on which bank that you're with. There's a number of other things that they're looking at, like preferential rates or no fees over this time. So each bank is specific in which customers they will help according to the product set that you have. So again, I just urge listeners to get onto their bank's website. All of them have put it, center front to be able to see, what needs to be done. And phone your bank. This is a time that you've got to spend a lot of time on the phone, to trawl the internet and to really understand there is relief out there. Another thing that the Banking Association of South Africa announced yesterday was that the banks are going to be stopping the SAS switch charge. So they're allowing you to go to the nearest ATM without having to travel further in order to save that fee. So they're completely negating the SAS switch fee that you would normally pay, which I think for people that are, many of your employees that are maybe earning smaller salaries, that sort of money that you would normally pay on a SAS switch fee is going to be quite a good quite a good thing for them.
That's great. If the listeners don't know what the SAS switch fee is if you go and draw money out of Standard Bank and you're actually an ABSA client, you get charged a higher fee for switching banks. So that's very useful. Thanks, Darlene. And you've mentioned a couple of resources that people can go and look at, which is the SARS website. Go and look at your own bank's website. Are there any particular places that anybody can go and get any more information on any relief? Does Finfind have any resource available on your website, or direct people to other resources?
Yeah, so Finfind in itself is actually brings together all of the funders across the entire country. So whether it's government or private sector, we put them into one database, and then an SME just comes in and puts in their details, who they are, where they're from, what sector they're in, how much they're looking for, what they need it for, and we ask a number of questions. And by that, we actually match them with the funder that can actually best help them. So there's over 600 funds, and it would obviously take a long time to trawl through all of those. So we've actually put that in a automated fashion with machine learning. So it's a bit like the dating Tinder site for small business. You go in, you say who you are and what you're looking for, and we match you with the fund that can assist you.
I like that.
Obviously would encourage you to go and look at that. But the other side, I'm not sure if the listeners or yourselves have heard, but there was an article that came out this weekend that government is going to be forcing everybody to actually put the government's COVID-19 site on their website, because there's so much fake news around at the moment, not only with regards to sort of scams and funds and that sort of thing, but also with regards to, should you wear gloves, should you wear masks, what should you be doing? There's a lot of sort of myths around the people that can and can't catch COVID-19. So we're going to be finding out in the next week what the parameters of that are, and every single business that has a website is going to actually have to put a link on their site where anybody, their staff or anyone coming to their site, that would be sent to that particular place to go and look for information. So I think that's something for all the listeners to keep a lookout for, and I can send that website through to everyone.
That's great. Thanks, Darlene. Appreciate that. So AutoTrader's already done that. We got on the front foot, and if you go into autotrader.co.za, you'll see the banner at the top, which then leads you to the official government website. Because of the fake news, go and look at the right news. Now, we're getting to the end of this show, and I've got two more questions. One is probably in Stan's camp, and that is when it comes to business rescue. So when a business now gets into trouble, Stan, finds themselves running out of cash, nowhere to turn, what are the provisions and rules around getting through things like business rescue? Do those rules change, or do they stay the same?
George, they stay the same. And having said that, the test to go into business rescue is whether the business is what we call financially distressed, which you might think is quite easy to meet in this scenario, but there is a 6-month period over which the test for being financially distressed needs to be assessed. So, the concept is, over the next 6 months, is my business going to be able to pay all of its debt? Or over the next 6 months, is it likely to go insolvent? And, if the answer to that is a resounding yes, then you will have met the test for being, financially distressed. And then there are ways to go into business rescue. One is quite quick and effective. It's done by way of a director's resolution, which then gets lodged at CIPC, and the process commences once the business rescue practitioner, sort of like a proactive liquidator, for want of a better term, gets appointed. And the theory is he steps into the shoes of the board of directors, puts a structure in place, or puts in place what we call a business plan. And the idea is to rehabilitate that particular business. Also, the other way to do it is by a third party, what we call an affected party. This is usually a shareholder of the company, or a director, or even a creditor who has had enough of the particular business, doesn't want to liquidate it, but wants it to go into business rescue. They can actually apply to court and get a court order that the company is in business rescue. Quite famously, lately, that's the SAA scenario, where they are now in business rescue by way of that procedure. But it's really a process which envisages things being in the normal course. You know, I really don't think business rescue is an appropriate tactic
mechanism
to adopt, even if you are financially distressed due to this pandemic. It's too quick. You know, business rescue contemplates a sort of more leisurely consideration of your business and of where you are, and that there's definitely no other room for you to go but to seek assistance from a business rescue practitioner. Now, to use business rescue sort of off the cuff almost, as it were, I think you'd have to consider it very carefully. You might be acting too hastily. And it is cumbersome, and you know, there's a lot of argument about how effective it is. And remember, you've got to pay a fair percentage to the business rescue practitioner. There are all of these factors. So it's not a simple procedure. It's there, it's available, but consider very carefully before going down that route.
Some good advice.
Could I add something to that?
Sure.
Sure. I've actually been in business rescue. One of my businesses about 4 years ago went through the business rescue process. We were in business rescue for 3 months, and it saved our business. So we were in a situation, like Dan says, is what happens is the litmus test is, are you in a liquidated state at the moment? In other words, do your liabilities exceed your assets, and you're in a place that you can't move forward. But the other test is, if the business was able to be relieved of some of that debt, is it viable? Is there cash flow projections? Are there contracts? Is the business able to move forward if it was able to get out of the situation that it had not? It couldn't have traded recklessly, that it got into for another reason. And all of those things apply to us. We went into business rescue. There were certain terms met with our creditors. We came out of that. None of our staff lost their jobs, because the whole reason for business rescue being put into place is to save jobs. And so I agree that this wouldn't be a reason only to go into business rescue. But if a business was in difficulty before this stage, before this crisis hit, so they were having a couple of really difficult months, a couple of things had gone wrong, themselves in a difficult space where they can't raise funds because their financials are not looking good. They're not going to make it through these next 3 months, but they would lose staff if they didn't. I think there's a good case then for business rescue and voluntarily going into business rescue, which is the best way to do it, and actually seeing the period through with somebody else sort of guiding the ship, as it were, alongside the CEO, coming out the other side where no one loses their jobs. And all of the creditors would rather take a deal of so much in the rand than the other option, which is liquidation, because that's essentially what the creditors would have on the table. So while I do agree that this crisis alone is not a reason to look at business rescue, I fully comply with that. If there are other extenuating circumstances for a business before coming into the situation, or because of this, they've lost a massive contract that would mean all their staff need to be laid off, I definitely think it's something. I think it's a fantastic vehicle that government's put in place that's very underutilized by small businesses who liquidate instead of taking that option.
Some good advice there from Stan Dewey and Darlene Menzies. Thank you, ladies and gents. And then very finally, back to Bobby and Cecilia. Let's start off with Bobby. What are your future plans for your dealership after lockdown? What have you learnt, particularly around the world of automotive digital retailing? And what do you see yourself going forward and getting out of this and the learning?
So our website needs to drastically improve, and we will need to eliminate, I could say, 99% of all interaction with your client and place it digitally. Get all the paperwork done, everything F&I done, everything done on our website. The only human interaction that I would like is the actual delivery. So if we can make it user-friendly and workable and work with the banks, I've already come into contact with Westbank. They're willing to look at something, get the validation process done digitally. I mean, we do have tools at the moment that can scan driver's licenses, can scan IDs and verify clients. Utilize those tools and integrate them on my website, so that if you find the car of your dreams on our website, the only time that you'll actually see a salesperson or physically interact with someone is when I hand you the keys. So that's my goal, and that's what I'm going to work very hard towards.
Thanks, Bobby. Cecilia, any insights from your side when it comes to automotive digital retailing and the topic of what we've learnt and what your dealership is going to focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. Our perspective on digital marketing has obviously changed even more, although we've always been on track with our digital marketing. For me, it's going to be to look at investing in online training for more of our staff, not only our sales executives or customer-facing people. To develop all our employees in digital skills by using and handling information, creating and editing, communicating, transacting, and being safe online. I think this will be a great investment for all businesses, is to make sure that most of your employees are actually work digitally, not only your sales staff, so that you can communicate with your customers when it's convenient for them and not when it's convenient for the dealership. We are in the position at the moment where we can basically do everything online except for the delivery. But I think as just by re-looking at our whole system and processes from the customer's point of view, to ensure that we make it painless for them and more convenient for them to do it whenever it suits them and not the dealership.
That's useful advice. Thanks, Cecilia. Now, so I suppose two views there. One from Bobby's point of view, and I don't think that either one doesn't take the other view. But from Bobby's point of view, create a world where the consumer can buy a car online and delivery is the only touch point. But that comes from internal processes, as Cecilia says. You've got to bring all of your internal processes online, and that's if I'm understanding you correctly, Cecilia, what you're talking about is internally the dealership has to change. It's not just the consumer-facing part of the website. So very finally, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's been a fascinating podcast. Any final words? Let's start off with Stan. Stan Dewey is from Dewey, Hertzberg, and Levy. And Stan, if anybody wants to get in touch with you or learn more, do you have a website and where can they go?
Absolutely. Thanks, George. Our website is Dewey, Hertzberg, Levy. And check us out on there and you can get hold of me through that. And thanks for the podcast, George. Some interesting views.
Some very interesting views. Darlene Menzies, from the CEO of Finfind. Darlene, any final views and where can people go to learn more about Finfind and the stuff you've been talking about?
Yeah, sure. I think final views is very much in line with the last speaker, which is, make sure all of your staff are aware of things like Zoom or Microsoft Teams and how to work online, that they've got the infrastructure that they need, so at a drop of a hat that they can do that. The other bit of advice is go and check if you actually at some stage took out business interruptive insurance. And if you didn't, make sure that after the crisis, it's something that's definitely part of your monthly budget, because I think it would have come in very handy. To get hold of us, Finfind, Finfind, finfind.co.za.
Great stuff.
Thanks again for including me in the podcast. Lovely to be on with all of you.
You're most welcome, and we will put all of these links in the podcast detail, so you'll be able to see them in the podcast detail. And then Cecilia Rees from Raceview Motors, dealer principal from Raceview Motors. Any final thoughts, Cecilia? And if any consumers are listening and they want to experience your dealership's online processes, where can they go?
Thank you for having me as part of the team on this podcast. Much appreciated. I would like to invite everybody to go and visit our website at raceviewmotors.co.za to experience our website. From start to finish, you can basically choose your vehicle due to the fact that we've got more than 6 photos. We've got enough description on the vehicle for you to make an informed choice. You can do your online application with us. We will submit it to the banks, and we will deliver after the 21 days. My cell phone number is also on the website. If there is anything that they need to inquire, they can contact me directly for help.
Great stuff. Thanks, Cecilia. And then last but by no means least, Bobby Petkoff from Mitmac Motors. Final thoughts, and where can people go to find out more about you and your dealership?
I think as my final thought, we've got a lot of time on our hands. Take the time and use it wisely. I think my goal is to come out more educated, after the lockdown, and come out a better person, find yourself again, and do 1 or 2 online courses. Just become a better human. You can find us on mitmacmotors.co.za. We've got a lot of wonderful tools on the website as well. We've got a calculator that gives you up to 12, 13 different payment options with 1 click. We've got a lot of tools. Use them. Engage with us. I've got a fully functional team. We can assist in answering any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, once again, and for that time. And we are unfortunately out of time, but it's been a fascinating conversation, and hopefully we've all learned something along the way, and hopefully that a lot of businesses, and particularly car dealerships, will learn out of this podcast and get through this in a positive way.